Hi everyone, I'm right here at my editing lab at home in my full full isolation gear, and I have realized that the audio on the video you're about to see is not the best. We recorded on the beach and it just didn't turn out great. So what I've done is I've cut around a lot of it. In places where I think it's salvageable, you're just going to hear me doing voiceover of what you would have heard, because the stuff we're talking about is really interesting. In the meantime, I promise we will get better at recording audio, but thank you for watching. Here's the video.
Good afternoon. I am Hugo, recording live for Out of Isolation, the video series where we tour guides do something that you can't. Take you on a tour of Melbourne and its surrounds. I am with John today. Say hi, John.
Hi, I'm John, another tour guide with Walks 101, and I am in a beautiful place I'm really excited to show you guys. So this place that anyone who lives in Melbourne will know pretty well as it comes into view. People will already be recollecting having nice walks at night during the daytime out to the St. Kilda. And already the audio is getting pretty unbearable, and so I'm going to come in here and tell you what I'm showing you, which is right behind you is the kiosk at the end of the St. Kilda Pier. It's one of the coolest things you can see down in St. Kilda. A lot of people will know this place because just when you go look around the corner where that gate is that I'm pointing at there, that is where the penguins are. There are penguins that come out here every single night, and so it's a great thing to go see for yourself. But that kiosk itself has got a fond place in people's hearts, just generally, because a lot of people have memories of their grandparents bringing them out there. It's been there for over 100 years. It went in 1901, and just as they were about to celebrate their centenary, a big fire came and burned the entire thing down. It was actually ruled to be arson. There was a spat of arson that took place in the early 2000s. And the people of St. Kilda were really devastated by this. What did they do? They decided to rebuild, but they didn't have the original plans. Eventually, at the last minute, someone was able to find the original plans for the St. Kilda kiosk and build it to its exact specifications from its former glory. And so it's a pretty great testament to the community rallying together, and it's something that I think you should go check out. I actually planned part of my, when I was planning my wedding, my wife and I looked out there as a possible venue to have a wedding reception at. So it's a really great spot. And one of the great things about it right now is the penguins. So every night we have penguins come out there. Most people will go over to Phillip Island, for example, to see the penguins, but penguins don't have GPS. They don't know where they're going. And so a lot of them will just go to another beach. And so that little rocky outpost is a perfect little nesting grounds for these little penguins, as they're called. So definitely worth your time to come check out the penguins, see the St. Kilda kiosk, and it's one of the most iconic sites that we have in this area.
Have you got a favorite penguin fact, John?
My favorite penguin fact, I think I gave it. They have the little micro naps. The micro naps out at sea.
They are, I think, up to 2 weeks, in fact, I've heard that they can be out at sea. My favorite is because they're out at sea so long, how do they drink, right? They can't drink seawater. They have an amazing filtration system through their eyelids that they can, like, filter out through, I think it's osmosis, but you're getting to the edge of my scientific knowledge here. The ability to kind of purify that water, and then they can drink that fresh water, allows them to stay out in the ocean for longer periods. That's where they're best on ocean. They really only come on land to make sure they've got a really waterproof coat for socializing, but mating and looking after their chicks in particular is the main reasons that they're on land.
Hugo, that might just be the most fun penguin fact I've ever heard in my life.
Penguin fact.
That was fun.
This new video series might just be penguin facts.
There's so many.
Well, where I am right now, have a look. This is Port Phillip Bay. Now, it's actually a bay. It looks like the ocean. That's how big it is. One of the largest expanses of water near any major city in the world. And because it's a bay, it's protected. And the waves that do come in, let's have a look. Let's see how small they are. They're tiny.
Comparing here with mine as well. We both have a lack of waves out on both sides.
Yeah, not much surfing going on there. So if you need to go surfing, you're required to go about an hour and a half outside of Melbourne. Places like Torquay, a very famous surf town, or down the other side to the Great Ocean Road, down in that direction. But no surfing going on around Port Phillip Bay area, just the kite surfing, a bit of windsurfing as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, the surfing thing, it's actually worth talking about because we're not really much of a surfing community. Go to Sydney for that. We are much too sophisticated here in Melbourne for that because this area, this whole area, has always been known as a recreational place to come, but in Victorian times, you wouldn't possibly come out here to go surfing. You would go to the sea baths, which I'll show you in just a moment. But first I want to show you this little plaque. So right down here at the base of the beach is this plaque, and I'll just read it for you here. It says, 6th of May, 1901, their Royal Highnesses the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall and York. This is a big deal. It's possibly the biggest deal ever to come to St. Kilda. It is the heir apparent, the next in line for the throne, who came down for a visit over here. And just at the end of St. Kilda Pier is where their boat disembarked. And everyone in Melbourne came to check this out. They played God Save the King, because there was a king. Queen Victoria had just died earlier that year. And there's a royal procession that went from the pier down to St. Kilda Road, past where the Shrine of Remembrance now is, it wasn't there at the time, over the Prince's Bridge, which is there today next to Flinders Street Station, wasn't there at the time, and went over a series of triumphal arches. So it went under the Pran Arch, went under the Citizens Arch, it even went under a butter arch, which is literally an arch made of boxes that butter came in at the time. These Victorians were incredibly proud of their dairy output over there. It's getting awfully windy out here. I'm not sure it's very good beach weather.
It is. It's almost like the wind gods knew that we were about to film this episode.
Is there somewhere I can go protect myself over near you from this wind?
Well, I've been walking past one of the most famous tourist icons in all of Melbourne. These are called the Brighton bathing boxes or Brighton beach boxes. These have been here for over 100 years, and believe it or not, there's no electricity, no running water in these bathing boxes. These are literally places today where you store your beach chairs and a few other kind of items that you'd need for the beach. I have seen one gentleman though who's opened up his little bathing box as like an office. He sits there with his MacBook and types away, which is a pretty novel use for them, but they were originally designed in those prudish Victorian times, going back where you would bring your swimming costume to the beach with you. You certainly wouldn't have worn it in the house and then just arrived in your car and gone for a dip. But to protect your modesty, you know, none of this Mr. Bean trying to get dressed at the beach. We'll link that video below if you haven't seen that one. So you would go inside your bathing hut and you would change and then come out and frolic in the water. Now this was certainly a place for Melbourne's wealthier. Brighton always has been, still is today. The average house price in Brighton is well over $2 million, and you would be shocked if I told you the price of these beach huts. In fact, this one just here sold late last year. John, do you want to have a guess at how much this beach box sold for?
Oh man, I'd say average house price in Melbourne is about 800K, so is a beach box what, like 50K?
50K? Up from there, my friend.
How much?
$340,000.
Jeez.
Now remember, no electricity, no running water, you're putting your beach chairs in it. But it is a bit of a status symbol, although perhaps a wise investment. These have been about doubling in value every decade or so.
Well, go ahead, sorry.
No, so if you do have a bit of spare cash to throw around, perhaps then you can come down and purchase one of these when they next come on the market. There's only about 86 of them or so right here, but they're all along, particularly the Mornington Peninsula.
Well, Hugo, I'm going to just cut you off for a second and show you a place to come where you don't have to worry as much about this. The place where I am right now, you can see grass on the roof, and you're going to hear some fire alarms going off around me. They're just doing some testing. But this is a place you can come and not spend any money. The St. Kilda Beach Baths in general were built, they were leased out to some private owners in this area who have these restaurants and bars around here. But one of the original agreements they made with the council was that if they were allowed to rent this building, which is a public building, they would have to maintain this rooftop as accessible to the public. And so what you have here is an area which has kind of been in some contested in recent years as the restaurants try to make this one of their alcohol patios, but the locals here have said, no, this is ours by agreement from the council. I'm not sure where this is going to end, and I might even be out of date right now because I've been following this story for about a year, but it's one of my favorite hidden secrets to explore in St. Kilda. When you come down to the base of the pier, you have the pier just behind me. You walk right over to the side entrance of the Beachcomber Cafe, and then from the Beachcomber Cafe, you can go straight up a little side staircase, which is not very well marked, but you get up to the top, beautiful view. Amazing place to watch the sunset, and something that I always love to tell people to go visit when they're down here in St. Kilda.
It's quite a loud alarm you've got there, John.
Yeah, I know, it's not ideal for our production, is it? Oh, there, now it's stopped.
There we go.
Yeah, and then one last thing that I'm going to point out on my side, and Hugo, I'll throw over to you if you have anything else you want to point out in the neighborhood. But just over this way, you also see this beautiful Victorian hotel. It's white just behind me. That is the Hotel Esplanade. Hotel Esplanade is known as the Espy locally here, and the Espy is one of the best rock and roll venues in town. It's been a hotel since the 1880s. It has hosted just about every Australian musician you can think of. I just was there a few months ago seeing Killing Heidi, which anyone in Australia will know. My favorite story about that place, though, is that it famously had John Farnham play there. Farnsey, as he's known here in Australia, iconic Australian musician. But he played there just a few months after the end of his farewell tour in the early 2000s. He said it was going to be his last tour, then he was retiring. Then he played this gig. There was a lawsuit from someone who'd gone to his farewell tour on the basis that that was his last show ever, and he sued John Farnham. The court ruled that the Australian public was not sufficiently harmed by another John Farnham concert, and so he didn't win any damages.
I love the wording, not sufficiently harmed by another John Farnham concert.
Who doesn't want another time performing The Voice, man? It's like, you know, greatest song in Australian history.
Yeah, I feel another artist, I don't want to name names, but they could do some sufficient harm if they decided to tour here again.
Well, do you have anything else to show us over there in Brighton, Hugo?
Well, I did mention before that Brighton has been the home of many of Melbourne's wealthy and even famous people, and along where I'm walking now, you can see perhaps some of the wealth. These properties here go for well over $3 million. So you would only really be in this area if you had a little cash to splash. And that is a big contrast to the northern suburbs. Fitzroy, Collingwood, Carlton. These are the areas that you might know of today as really hip, cool, vibrant parts of Melbourne. But back in the day, they were the very poor, very working class areas of Melbourne. The south was where the wealthy would congregate and wealthy would live. Today, so there's still a little bit of that north-south divide. If we could paint with a very broad brush, we might say that today the north thinks of the south as those people who wear their workout pants, you know, those stretchy yoga pants just to go down to the cafes and have a latte with the girls. And the people from the south maybe think the people from the north are the people who are spending $60 to buy some clothes at a vintage store that their dad would have thrown out about 10 years ago. And they're all so obsessed with looking different that they all end up looking the same. Or something like that. Now, I'm from Richmond.
You're halfway. What are you?
Either the worst or the best of both worlds, depending on who you ask.
Well, it's one of those things, I think the farther south you get down Mornington Peninsula way, the older and older the money gets as well. It's that new money versus old money sort of divide at the same time, because Fitzroy is certainly not a cheap place to live nowadays, but there's always that kind of exclusionary thing that happens in neighborhoods where we say we're the real people and you people aren't real, right? It happens all over the world.
Yeah.
If we keep doing this thing for too long, I think maybe we should do an episode out Mornington Peninsula's way. Maybe we can go to Lindsay Fox's house, one of the richest people in Australia who lives out in Mornington.
Oh, very nice. Hit up some wineries.
Yeah, man, this is great. We'll have to do it social distancing though. We'll have to be at separate wineries at different times.
I like this idea.
Yeah, man. Well, let's wrap things up then. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been Out of Isolation. This is a show we're doing every single day for tour guides like Hugo and myself that don't have work to be able to share what we do with all of you without making you leave the house. If you have enjoyed this, the best thing you can do is tell other people about it. You can do it that old school way of just talking, or you can hop on to YouTube and hit subscribe. That actually helps us a bunch because once we hit a certain number of subscribers, it gives us a lot more options to make this a proper business. finally, the last thing you can do is hop over to the link down below this video, click on to our Patreon, and if you'd like to chuck us some shekels to help support us during this time when we don't have any work, we wouldn't say no. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I have been John, that's been Hugo, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Audio turned out okay on that. We'll see how the audio goes, huh? You're such a I already know now. I know you well enough.